Hi class. Today we're going to talk about the inductive form of causal argument. And these are important obviously because in life we want to know what causes something. In fact, I would argue it's a universal human urge. You know, if the door swung open behind you or to the side of you, you would want to know what caused it. You wouldn't accept the idea that nothing caused it. Something had to, a gust of wind, one of your children, something happened that made that door open. So we search for causes. Causal arguments are always probabilistic. We might think, we act and sometimes think we know with certainty what causes something, but actually we never know for certain what caused something because we don't see the actual causal relationship. We see event A happen and then we see event B happen afterward and we assume A caused B. But it's always possible that some underlying cause is making both A and B happen, right? Like for many Christians, the idea is that Joe's hand grabs the doorknob and opens the door. Joe caused the door to open. We see that enough that we say, okay. But a Christian might say, yeah, actually God was causing Joe, because part of God's plan or God's will for Joe to open that door. God caused Joe to open the door. So God is the cause of both Joe and the door. And there's a deeper causal structure we were unaware of. It wasn't really Joe, it was God the whole time. So that's always possible, right? We often think, one thing's causing another. We might find that we were wrong all along, and it was actually maybe 5 things together that were causing the infection or the illness. So you have to be careful about causal relationships. They're always probabilistic. We can get a high degree of probability. The stove caused my hand to be burned. That's a high degree of probability. But we can never get to certainty because we can never actually witness or observe the causal relationship itself, which is what makes causal arguments inductive in nature, right? How do we know what's causing what? So there are basically 3 methods we use to try and make causal arguments. Stuart Mill, an 18th century philosopher, British philosopher, made these famous. They're called Mill's methods. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see the PowerPoint. We can look at that together. So the first is the method of agreement. And this is when you have a situation where something happens over and over again. And every time this thing happens, every time X happens, Y happens, right? So easy examples are every time I put my hand near the fire, my hand heats up. And so we begin to say, well, the fire is causing my hand to heat up. The fire is causing the meat to cook. The fire is causing the marshmallow to roast. And we do that because over and over again, we do the same thing, put something near a fire, and we get the same result, heat. And so we begin to associate fire as causing those phenomena, right? Method of agreement. Examples might be, we're trying to figure out what made people sick. Half the flight from Japan to Copenhagen got sick. Why? We realized every person who ate the omelet on the plane was the one who got sick. Well, it's a good chance that something with the omelets made people sick, right? And so it's agreement because we're looking at what is similar, what is in agreement with all of the cases of the people who got sick. Or every time Jake drinks too much alcohol, he wants to fight someone. Agreement would say maybe alcohol makes Jake mean, right? That's what's the cause. Every time I pet a cat, my allergies act up. Method of agreement. What's similar? What's always around when my allergies are acting up? There's always a cat around. That's the thing that's the same. And so over time, you can make a kind of strong causal argument. The criteria for how to make some of these arguments with regard to agreement, you want to have some background information, right? We know that cats tend to cause people to have allergic reactions. We know that alcohol can make people mean. We know that food can make people sick. It would be very weird if we said, man, 10 people got sick on the flight. All 10 of them, had a guitar. Like, what does guitar have to do with being sick, right? There's no causal relationship that we can figure out. So we might say that's coincidence, right? So you want to make sure there's general information about what kinds of things are actually relevant to causes. Every time we bring Fred with us on a picnic, it rains. Fred causes the rain. Well, we know that there's really no causal link there because we have general information about what causes rain, and Fred is not one of those things, right? 2, there should be enough information establishing a causal link. So it can't be, I was around a cat once, my nose ran, I have allergies to cats. But if I've been around 15 cats and every single time I'm around cats, my allergies act up, then we start to have more of a pattern, right? And then 3, be sure that the cause in question is relevant, right? So we don't want to have a totally irrelevant cause and effect. The second method is called the method of difference. This is where we look at what's different between the things that are occurring to try and establish, what happened. So I get in my car and it won't start. And so I think to myself, well, every single day I've gotten into my car, it started. What's different about today? And I think, oh, I haven't got gas in 2 weeks. That's what's different. And we say, well, maybe that's the cause, right? Maybe there's a gas problem, and I would look at my gas gauge and see. So it's not looking at what is the same amongst examples. It's looking at what's different. So again, I have allergies every time I'm around a cat, but then when John puts the cat outside, my allergies stop acting up. So we change something, we see what's different, and we try to establish whether that gives me a separate reaction. Or, all 10 passengers who got sick had the omelet, and the passengers that didn't get sick, they all had cereal. Well, now we've got a difference, right? Those who didn't get sick had cereal. Those who did get sick had an omelet. The difference seems to be in the food, right? Jake and Sally's relationship was going well until Jake had lunch with his ex-girlfriend. Now everything else remains the same, but Jake seems distant and uninterested, right? So Sally might say, everything was fine. Why is it different? The only thing that changed is he had lunch with his ex-girlfriend. Maybe he still has feelings for her. He's conflicted now. And so you get a sense that that's what's different. So it's a method of difference. What's causing this new or different behavior? Obviously, you can use agreement and disagreement together like we did with the cat allergies or the plane sickness, or you can focus just on one or the other. The better causal arguments are the ones that can combine agreement and difference. The criteria are the same. You want to have good information, background information about what causes things, what tends to cause things. You want to make sure you have a pattern. It's not just a one-off, but a pattern is good to establish a stronger argument. And you want to make sure, of course, that the things you're mentioning are relevant to the conclusion you're drawing, not irrelevant causes. The final method is the method of variation, concomitant variation. I usually just say variation. And this is where, as things increase over time, we see effects increase or decrease over time. As something decreases over time, we see the effects increase or decrease over time. So there seems to be, I move the knob to the right, and as I do, the volume gets louder. As I move the knob to the left, the volume gets lower. I start to say every time I do this, right, there's a reaction. I think that this knob is the volume button. This knob is causing the volume to go up and down. As I move it to the right, it gets louder and louder and louder. As I move it to the left, lower and lower and lower. Variation, right? Some easy examples are, the more someone smokes, the higher chance that is that they get lung cancer. So we do all kinds of studies to show that lung cancer occurs much more prominently in people who smoke. So we say it looks like there's a causation here. The less one smokes, the less chance they have of getting lung cancer. The more one smokes, the more chance. Or like selenium levels in the soil causing cancer. In areas where there's elevated selenium, we have larger instances of cancer outbreak. Where there's lower selenium, there's lower. So there seems to be a causal relationship by variation. The more I do something, the more I see the effects. The less I do something, the less. The more I work out, the more weight I lose, the better my body looks. I say working out seems to cause the weight loss. The less I work out, the more I feel lazy, less energy, I gain weight, right? More or less. Of course, like everything, are some fallacies, which I've mentioned. So again, you can confuse coincidental relationships with causal ones. Every superstition is like this. It's called the post hoc fallacy. Every time I step on the chalk line in baseball, I strike out. I'll jump over the chalk line now because that's what's causing me to strike out. Or every time I undo my batting gloves and the Velcro of my batting gloves before I step in, I get a hit. Doing the Velcro on my batting gloves must cause me to get a hit. These are just superstitions. They're coincidental. There's nothing causal about them, right? And of course, it doesn't work because no matter what superstition you have as a hitter, you're still going to strike out and get some hits, and it's going to work out in the wash. This idea that by doing my batting gloves, I'm going to get a hit every time doesn't hold. Sometimes we ignore a common cause. So we might say, oh man, I have a fever and I'm vomiting. My fever is causing my vomiting. Actually, it's probably a virus or bacteria that's causing both the fever and the vomiting. So there's an underlying common cause that's doing both. So the fever doesn't cause the vomiting. It's actually the virus causing the fever and the vomiting. I used to think when I watched the Rocky movies that Rocky's fist caused Apollo Creed's head to fly back. And it looked very real. Now I know it's like an orchestrated dance. It's a movie. So it's the dance and the orchestration that makes it look like one is causing the other, but there's actually a deeper underlying cause for both of those events, the fist flying and the head moving back. So you want to be careful of that. Confusing cause and effect. I want to talk a little bit about like some serious issues maybe. So when we think about crime in the United States, we often think of crime attributed to freedom. People make bad choices, and that's why they commit crime. They're selfish or something. But we know that human behavior is a lot more complicated than that. And in fact, crime rates are always higher in areas of poverty. Anywhere you go in the world, if there's higher poverty, you're going to find more crime. And so there seems to be a connection between living in poverty, being desperate, trying to find enough money for your next meal or whatever it might be, and being willing to commit crime or to distract yourself with using drugs or something else. And so I think that we have to be careful, right? What's free will? Yeah, people make choices, but my choices are predicated on my environment a lot. If you go to any school, you follow a student to a good teacher's classroom and that student behaves. You follow that same student to a bad teacher's classroom, they often act up. So it's not just like they're making choices to act up or not. A lot of it is your environment and what situation you're in. And that dictates what we do in many respects. And so I think it's important that we think about, like, if I were in a different situation, maybe I would commit crimes that I wouldn't now because I'm comfortable and safe and protected. And if we want to reduce crime, we have to get the cause right. If it's free will, then we might say to reduce crime, we have to increase punishment so that people will make better choices. But if we think that crime might be the result of poverty, at least in part, then to reduce crime, we have to reduce poverty. We've got to find better jobs, more pay. So I think causal relationships are really important. What's causing what, and how does this work? And then how do we fix things? So I hope this is helpful to you. I've been enjoying this. I hope you have as well. If you have any questions at all for me or needing help in any way, let me know. And I will see you online.